I need you to stay with me for the next few minutes, because what I'm about to tell you is the kind of story that changes the way you see the people closest to you. I walked into my own living room expecting a quiet anniversary celebration. Nothing felt different, but by the time the clock struck midnight, everything I thought I knew about my marriage was gone. And what I found out next, most people can't even bring themselves to say out loud. Before we go deeper into this story, take a second and hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and let us know where you're watching from. I'm curious to know how far these stories travel. Welcome back to Family Secrets and Revenge. My name is Ethan Vance. For 7 years, I thought I was living the definitive American dream in the quiet suburbs of Silver Spoon, Connecticut. I had built a thriving logistics firm from the ground up, and I shared a custom-built colonial home with my wife, Vanessa. Vanessa was the kind of woman who commanded every room she entered, elegant, sharp, and intensely ambitious. When we married, her family insisted we were a match made in heaven. But I wasn't naive. Coming from a background where hard work bought every inch of ground I stood on, I knew the value of protection. That's why, before we ever walked down the aisle, we signed an ironclad prenuptial agreement. At the time, it felt like a formality. Years later, it would become a weapon. The cracks in a marriage don't always appear as loud arguments or slammed doors. Sometimes, they manifest as a silence that slowly fills the rooms of a house. By the winter of 2025, Vanessa's corporate consulting job required frequent emergency trips to Chicago and New York. I trusted her implicitly. When you love someone, your brain naturally builds excuses for them. She's tired, you tell yourself. She's stressed under the weight of her new partnership at the firm. But then came the subtle changes. The phone placed face down on the granite kitchen island. The sudden change in her passcode, a security update for work, she claimed. And then there was Julian Vance's sudden appearance in our social circle. Julian was a high-flying hedge fund manager who had recently moved his practice from Manhattan to our local area. He was wealthy, aggressively charming, and possessed an arrogance that radiated off him like heat. He started showing up at the same charity galas, the same country club dinners. And every time he did, Vanessa's eyes seemed to find him just a fraction of a second too fast. It was a Tuesday evening when the veil finally dropped. Vanessa was supposedly at an overnight leadership conference in Boston. I had stayed late at my office, hammering out a regional shipping contract, when my phone buzzed. It was an automated notification from our shared home security account. Someone had disarmed the alarm system at our private lake cabin in upstate New York, a property Vanessa rarely visited alone because she detested the isolation. My chest tightened. A normal husband might have called his wife to check in. But a cold, analytical instinct, the same instinct that allowed me to build a multi-million-dollar business, told me to quiet my breathing, log into the remote camera feed, and simply watch. What I saw on that high-definition screen didn't just break my heart, it calcified it. There was Vanessa, poured into a dress I had bought her, pouring champagne for Julian. The laugh she gave him was a laugh I hadn't heard directed at me in over 3 years. They weren't just having a casual indiscretion. The familiarity in their movement spoke of an ongoing, deeply rooted betrayal. The human mind is a resilient thing, but when faced with absolute betrayal, it undergoes a terrifyingly cold evolution. I sat in the dim glow of my office computer monitor, watching the live feed from our lake cabin. I didn't yell, I didn't punch the drywall. I just watched Julian slide his arm around Vanessa's waist, pulling her into a kiss that tasted entirely of my ruin. They looked like a couple in a luxury commercial. Beautiful, wealthy, and utterly untouchable. Julian looked toward the direction of the mantle camera, completely unaware I was staring back at him through the lens, and smiled that smug, Ivy League smile of his. He thought he was the ultimate apex predator. He thought he was taking a prize from a lesser man. I closed my laptop. My hands weren't shaking anymore. In that single, frozen moment, the love I had nurtured for Vanessa for nearly a decade evaporated, replaced by something much more durable, an absolute desire for complete, meticulous justice. I drove home in total silence, through the dark Connecticut roads. The house was empty, echoing with the ghost of a family that no longer existed. I went down to the basement, opened my heavy combination safe, and pulled out a thick, blue-bound folder that had gathered dust for 7 years. Our prenuptial agreement. I flipped past the signatures, past the asset schedules, Straight to Section 14, the Infidelity Morality Clause. Written in precise legal prose by one of the most ruthless family attorneys in Hartford, it stated that in the event of proven marital misconduct, the offending party would forfeit all claims to joint assets, alimony, and the primary marital residence. Vanessa had signed it with a careless laugh back then, confident she would always be the one holding the cards. The next morning, I didn't confront Vanessa when she returned from her conference, looking radiant and smelling subtly of an unfamiliar, expensive cologne. I played the part of the busy, oblivious husband perfectly. I kissed her cheek, asked how Boston was, and left for work. But instead of going to my logistics firm, I drove directly to a secure office building in downtown Stamford to meet with Marcus Vance. No relation to me, just the sharpest private investigator money could buy. I laid out the digital footage from the cabin. Marcus looked at it, then looked up at me with a grim, professional nod. "This is a start, Ethan," he said, adjusting his glasses. "But high-priced defense lawyers can argue digital manipulation or hacking. We need a pattern. We need physical surveillance, bank records, and dates. If we're going to trigger an infidelity clause this absolute, we need a mountain of evidence they can't climb out of." I gave him an open budget and full access. Over the next 3 weeks, Marcus and his team became invisible shadows trailing my wife and her lover. They captured them at boutique hotels in Manhattan, sharing candlelit dinners in secluded corners of Rhode Island, and holding hands in the back of Julian's luxury SUV. But Marcus found something even better than photos. He discovered that Julian wasn't just stealing my wife, he was actively planning to ruin me financially. Vanessa had been quietly downloading proprietary client data from my logistics company's cloud network, feeding it to Julian so his hedge fund could back a rival startup aiming to undercut my regional contracts. They weren't just having an affair, they were executing a corporate assassination. It takes an incredible amount of mental discipline to sit across a dinner table from someone who is actively trying to destroy your life and pass them the salt. For the next month, that was my reality. Vanessa became increasingly bold, her tone with me shifting from distant to outright condescending. She started drop-feeding comments about how my business was stagnating and how some of our oldest clients were looking elsewhere. She was setting the stage, making it look like I was failing, so that when she walked away, she could claim she left a sinking ship. Julian, too, couldn't resist flaunting his perceived victory. I ran into him at a charity fundraiser at the country club. Vanessa was at the bar, leaving the two of us standing near the veranda overlooking the golf course. Julian swirled his scotch, looking at me with an expression of profound pity. "You know, Ethan," he said, his voice dripping with casual malice, "in this world, things naturally gravitate toward those who know how to manage them best. Businesses, assets, even people. Some men just don't have the capacity to hold on to what they have." He thought he was being incredibly clever, a master strategist dropping hints to a clueless victim. I just smiled, took a sip of my drink, and said, "You're absolutely right, Julian. Things always end up exactly where they belong." By the end of April, Marcus handed me an encrypted flash drive. It contained hundreds of high-resolution photographs, geotagged hotel receipts, flight manifests under false names paid for with Vanessa's personal credit card, and forensic digital evidence of her accessing my company's servers from Julian's penthouse apartment. It was flawless. The trap was fully constructed, bait laid out, and all that was left was to choose the venue for the execution. I decided our upcoming 7th wedding anniversary party would be the perfect stage. Vanessa had insisted on hosting a lavish dinner party at our home, inviting 40 of our closest friends, colleagues, and, naturally, Julian. She wanted the world to see her as the perfect hostess, the glittering centerpiece of Connecticut high society. I agreed to everything, even volunteering to handle the catering and the entertainment setup. I hired a professional audiovisual team, telling them I had prepared a special surprise anniversary slideshow to play on the large projector screen in the ballroom during the main course. They set up the equipment perfectly, testing the audio levels until they were crisp and clear. Vanessa thought I was being sweet, a desperate attempt by a failing husband to win back her affection. She had no idea I was preparing a funeral. The night of the anniversary arrived, crisp and clear. The colonial house was glowing with lights, valet drivers moving luxury sedans up and down the driveway, and jazz music drifting through the open French doors. Vanessa looked spectacular in an emerald green silk gown, playing the part of the adoring wife to perfection in front of our guests. She kept her hand on my arm, smiling for photos, but every time the front door opened, her eyes darted past me. When Julian walked in, wearing a custom tuxedo and carrying a ridiculously expensive bottle of vintage champagne, the air in the room shifted. He walked straight up to us, offering a hand that I shook with genuine amusement. "Happy anniversary, Ethan." "Vanessa," he said, his eyes lingering on my wife's neckline a second too long. 7 years is quite an achievement in this day and age. Vanessa gave a soft, breathless laugh. "Thank you, Julian. Ethan really outdid himself tonight. He even insisted on a special presentation later." Julian looked at me, a glimmer of mockery in his eyes. "Oh, really? A presentation? I can't wait to see it." Before we continue, take a second and share your thoughts so far on this story below. I read every single one. I looked Julian dead in the eye, matching his smile, and whispered, "Trust me, Julian. It's going to be unforgettable." At 9 o'clock, the catering staff served the main course, and the 40 guests took their seats around the long, beautifully decorated tables in our formal dining hall. The projector screen lowered smoothly from the ceiling at the front of the room. I stood up, tapping my champagne glass with a silver spoon. The room fell silent, faces turning toward me with polite smiles. Vanessa sat at the head of the main table, looking up at me with an expression of mild boredom, while Julian sat just 3 seats away, looking thoroughly amused. "Thank you all for being here tonight," I began, my voice echoing clearly through the high-ceilinged room. 7 years ago, Vanessa and I made vows to each other. We promised honesty, loyalty, and partnership. Over the last few months, I've realized just how much work goes into maintaining those vows behind the scenes. Vanessa has been working incredibly hard, traveling constantly, expanding her horizons, and tonight, I wanted to share a comprehensive look at exactly what she's been dedicating her time to. Please, turn your attention to the screen. The lights in the dining room dimmed automatically. The screen flashed to life, but instead of the expected montage of wedding photos or vacation snapshots, a crisp, high-definition video played. It was the security footage from our lake cabin. The audio was perfectly clear. The entire room watched in stunned, breathless silence as Vanessa's voice echoed through the speakers, talking to Julian about how easily they were going to strip me of my logistics company. "Ethan is clueless," Vanessa's voice purred from the speakers as she poured champagne on screen. "Once the rival startup takes his top 3 clients, the firm's valuation will drop. I'll file for divorce, claim half of what's left, and we can merge it all into your fund." The video cut to a montage of crystal-clear photographs. Vanessa and Julian entering a boutique hotel in Manhattan, holding hands on a beach in Rhode Island, and finally, a document showing the forensic logs of my corporate data being transferred to Julian's IP address. The silence in the dining room was heavy, suffocating, and absolute. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. I signaled the tech crew, and the lights snapped back on. The transition from darkness to bright light was jarring, exposing every pale, horrified face in the room. Vanessa was frozen, her fork suspended halfway to her mouth, her face drained of all color until she looked like a marble statue. The emerald dress that had made her look like royalty now looked like a shroud. She slowly turned her head toward me, her lips parting, but no sound came out. Julian was the first to react, his corporate arrogance overriding his shock. He stood up, knocking his chair back with a loud clatter against the hardwood floor. "What the hell is this, Ethan?" he barked, his voice cracking with a mixture of rage and panic. "This is a pathetic, desperate invasion of privacy. It's defamatory, it's illegal, and you've just humiliated your wife in front of her friends. You think this changes anything? You think this gives you power? She's leaving you anyway, you idiot. And half of everything you built is going to belong to her, and by extension to me. You've just guaranteed your own bankruptcy." A few of our friends gasped, turning their eyes away from the raw ugliness of the confrontation. Vanessa finally found her voice, standing up, her hands trembling violently. "Ethan, how could you do this?" she whispered, trying to play the victim for the remaining audience. "If you wanted a divorce, we could have talked, but this is monstrous." I didn't answer them. Instead, I calmly walked over to the main entrance of the dining room and opened the double doors. Waiting in the hallway were two men in dark suits. One was Marcus Vance, holding a heavy leather briefcase. The other was Mr. Harrison, my family attorney, carrying a stack of freshly countersigned legal documents. They walked into the room with the synchronized precision of executioners. Before we go deeper, I would love to hear your point of view. Tell me what part hit you the hardest in my story, and share your thoughts in the comments. Harrison didn't look at the guests. He walked straight to the head table, pulled out 3 identical packets from his briefcase, and placed one in front of Vanessa, one in front of Julian, and one in front of me. "What is this trash?" Julian sneered, refusing to touch the paperwork. Mr. Harrison adjusted his glasses, his voice calm, dry, and terrifyingly clear. "Mr. Vance, Mrs. Vance, these are formal legal filings. Specifically, a petition for an expedited divorce decree based on irrefutable marital misconduct, coupled with a civil lawsuit for corporate espionage, theft of trade secrets, and tortious interference." Vanessa's eyes raced across the top page of the packet. Her breath hitched. "Ethan, no," she stammered. "I suggest you read Section 14 of your prenuptial agreement, Vanessa," I said, speaking for the first time in minutes. "The infidelity clause we both signed. It states very clearly that if physical or digital evidence of adultery is established, the marital estate remains entirely mine. You walk away with exactly what you brought into this marriage, a single savings account containing $12,000, the house is mine, the logistics firm is mine, and the corporate data you stole, it's already been flagged by federal trade attorneys. Marcus here spent the last 12 hours working with our IT security team to trace the exact IP addresses used to receive those files. Julian, your hedge fund's primary server, is listed as the destination." The arrogance vanished from Julian's face so fast it was almost comical. His skin turned a sickly shade of gray. A civil divorce battle was one thing, but corporate espionage involving proprietary data and trade secrets crossed into federal territory. If his fund's institutional investors found out he was using stolen data from a target's spouse to execute market undercuts, his career was over, his investors would pull out within the hour, and he would be facing a grand jury. "This is a bluff," Julian whispered, though his eyes were wide, darting frantically around the room, realizing 40 prominent members of the local business community had just witnessed his criminal intent. "You can't prove the data went to my fund." Marcus Vance stepped forward, pulling a printed network diagnostic sheet from his folder. "We already did, Mr. Vance. The affidavit from the server hosting company was signed at 4 p.m. today. The forensic footprint is absolute. Your compliance officer is going to have a very long morning tomorrow." Vanessa looked at Julian, waiting for him to say something, to defend her, to tell her they would fight it together. But Julian wouldn't even look at her. He was already checking his phone, his fingers flying across the screen, likely trying to contact his legal team to distance himself from her as quickly as humanly possible. The grand romantic partner who had promised her a glittering new life in a Manhattan penthouse had vanished, replaced by a terrified white-collar criminal trying to save his own skin. "Julian?" Vanessa asked, her voice cracking, reaching out to touch his arm. He flinched away from her touch as if she were radioactive. "Don't touch me, Vanessa," he muttered, his voice cold and frantic. "You told me he didn't have any tracking on those servers. You messed this up." He didn't say goodbye. He didn't look at the guests. He grabbed his coat from the back of the chair and practically ran out of the dining room, his expensive shoes clicking frantically across the hardwood floor, until the heavy front doors slammed shut behind him. The dining room was silent again, save for the sound of Vanessa's quiet, ragged breathing. She looked around the table at the people she had invited to witness her triumph. Her friends looked away, studying their plates or their wine glasses, completely unwilling to get caught in the blast radius of her ruin. I looked at my attorney, who nodded. "Mrs. Vance," Mr. Harrison said, "per the emergency injunction attached to that petition, your access to the primary residence is revoked, effective immediately. A security team is currently waiting at the gates. You have exactly 20 minutes to collect your personal clothing and medication. Anything else left in the house will be audited and processed according to the terms of the prenup. If you refuse to comply, local law enforcement is already on standby to escort you from the property for criminal trespass." Vanessa didn't scream. She didn't cry. The absolute finality of the trap I had built left her with no options, no leverage, and no dignity. She slowly stood up, her emerald dress trailing behind her like a deflated balloon, and walked out of the room with her head down, followed closely by Marcus to ensure she didn't take anything that didn't belong to her. I turned back to my guests. The atmosphere was awkward, to say the least, but I felt a lighter sensation in my chest than I had in years. "I apologize for the interruption to the evening," I said, raising my glass one last time. "The catering is fully paid for, and the bar remains open. But as for me, I think my time in this house is officially concluded. Have a wonderful night." I walked out the back doors, down to my car, and drove away, leaving them with the wreckage of a betrayal that had backfired completely. It took less than 6 months for the dust to fully settle. Vanessa tried to fight the prenuptial agreement in court, but faced with the mountain of forensic and physical evidence Marcus had collected, her attorneys quickly realized they were holding a losing hand. She settled for the exact terms of the agreement, walking away with nothing but her clothes and her tiny personal savings. Julian's hedge fund faced a massive internal compliance audit after I filed the civil suit for trade secret theft. His investors panicked, pulling over 40% of their capital in a matter of weeks, destroying his reputation in the financial sector. He was forced to settle out of court for a sum that ensured he would be paying off my logistics company for the next decade. They thought they had won because they were playing a dirty game behind closed doors. But they forgot that when you violate the trust of someone who built everything from nothing, you aren't dealing with a victim. You're dealing with someone who knows exactly how to tear down what you love, piece by piece, legally and permanently. Thank you so much for staying with me through this incredible journey of justice and reclamation. Stories like this remind us that truth always finds a way to the light, and those who plot in the dark eventually have to face the morning. If you found Ethan's story powerful, please take a moment to like this video, leave your thoughts in the comments below, and subscribe to Family Secrets and Revenge so you never miss another tale of cinematic justice. Your support means everything to us, and I want to know, what would you have done if you were in Ethan's shoes? Share your thoughts below, and I'll see you in the next video.